Okay, so in January 1980, I had come into possession of Hubbard's personal archive. And I met Omar in October, I believe it was, 1980. And I met him in East Grinstead in England. And actually gave a talk at that time to people in East Grinstead, Scientologists, and Omar and his wife, and there may have been some outsiders, but in any case it concerned my discovery of these materials, what I was finding, and the offer to give them copies of them or whatever to Omar to do the biography. Now we had possession of these documents that would make it possible, and that was a huge selling point in my meetings with Omar in England, which then led to contracting with him, and that was probably in November, December period of 1980. So prior to my meeting Omar, prior to my contractor, the organization contracting with him, I had already spent some months possessing these documents and already myself knew that there were serious discrepancies between the truth about Hubbard and the lies which were the organization was spreading about him, and he of course had told about himself. So I did not, however, say anything to Omar for quite a period of time, but simply dutifully, as a good researcher, provided him with the raw documents. So then he begins going through the same process of reading the same documents that I had, and at some point within the next few months we then began to talk more or less openly and frankly between ourselves about what the documents contained and the fact that Hubbard had lied so much about himself and so much of what was written about him was utter bullshit. So then Omar and I worked together for the next year. So from the fall of 1980 through into, well, my last day was December 12, 1981. So throughout that whole year, I met with Omar many times, traveled with him into the Midwest. We visited Hubbard's old haunts in Washington State and Montana, and traveled around and talked about documents, and I continued to copy documents and provide it to them to him over that period of time, so that by the time it was time for me to leave, he really understood where I was coming from. We were both very concerned by that time that just because of the mass of the lies that we were uncovering and could document, that it was very difficult, to get the biography actually published, because Hubbard, of course, and the organization had permission by the contract to vet this thing. So Omar was very afraid that it would never get published, but he was also dedicated to making sure that it was the truth. So we continued to work together right up until the end. I provided him my final day inside, everything that I could that he felt he was going to need, because he also knew that once I was gone, his source of documents and the flow of documents was going to be cut off, which indeed it was. Then I was in Los Angeles at the time, and my wife at the time, Jocelyn, and I then traveled up to Utah, where Omar lived. We spent a day there overnight and then traveled to Canada, up here to Chilliwack for Christmas, and then returned to Southern California, and I continued working with Omar really for some months into 1981, and even later than that, or into 1982, into 1983, as he continued to write the biography. Ultimately, Scientology paid him to not write it, and they paid him, according to Larry Brennan recently, something over $100,000 to not publish the biography. And so there was a parting of the ways between me and Scientology, and then Omar and Scientology, and we both, for a period of time, were at war with them, and then he settled. I carried on with my war really ever since. Omar and I remained good friends. We remained in touch. He died in, I believe, 1997, 1998. I saw him one last time. He came up here to Victoria and met him for a meal. His wife, my brother and I had a meal together in Victoria, and then he returned to California and Nevada and died shortly thereafter. He was very key in my getting out of Scientology. Having someone there to talk to who was smart, who understood the documents, who understood, real life things. Espionage, lies, journalism, theology, and to be able to talk to him was just very important in my life.